The former Communications Minister, Paul Fletcher, was instrumental in making this happen. Standing up to big, powerful tech companies isn't easy. And now that he's in opposition, I thought he'd be more open to sharing more of an insight into what actually went down. I'll also ask him about Scott Morrison and the portfolios. Maybe he's offended that his weren't deemed worthy of grabbing by the former Prime Minister. Let's ask him. Paul Fletcher, thank you so much for coming in.
Great to be with you, Aaron.
What is your reaction?
Well, look, there's been a lot of excitement over the last few days. The Labor government seems to have jumped on this story about the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison swearing himself into various portfolios. It seems to have suited their political interest to keep talking about this. Look, at the end of the day, Scott's apologised to colleagues who were offended by that, and I think that's he's chosen to handle it that way. But can I just make this point? When it comes to online safety, standing up to the big tech giants, all of the other important work we did in government, Scott was front and centre in that. It was not easy to stare down Facebook and Google when it came to the News Media Bargaining Code. Josh Frydenberg as Treasurer, Scott Morrison as Prime Minister, did a fantastic job. I worked with them very closely on that. So, look, it's not surprising that the Albanese Labor government is trying everything they can to, run down the reputation of the former government. That's politics. It's a bit unsavoury, but that's the way it works. But let's not be naive about why they're doing it.
And people like Joe Hockey are doing it too, who was on your side of politics.
Look, when journalists ask you for a comment on something, when the media gets excited about something, everybody who's ever had any fleeting association with politics has been asked for a comment on it this week. And look, I've been clear in my comments. If Scott had been sworn into my portfolio without me knowing about it, I would have been unhappy about it, to my knowledge. That didn't happen. Look, I welcome the fact that former Prime Minister Scott Morrison has apologised to colleagues. But look, let's keep it in context. He led our country through a very difficult period. The intensity of the workload, particularly in that early part of 2020, I was not one of the key ministers involved in that. There were 4 or 5 people who were just working virtually around the clock. Greg Hunt told me that he was getting 1,000 texts a day. People have just forgotten what an incredibly tense and stressful period that was. And the reality is, Australia's track record through the pandemic, we didn't make every decision perfectly, of course not, but the health outcomes better than most countries against which we would benchmark ourselves. The economic outcomes, our economy by December 2021 was bigger than 2 years before, December 2019. Very few other countries can match that.
OK, big tech companies, they're not used to governments standing up to them. Australia did it before anyone else in the world, and you led that front and centre. They're renowned for allowing bullying, threats, abuse to go on online. Did you receive any of that from them? Did you ever feel like you were being bullied in that robust discussion process?
When our Liberal National Government came to power in 2013, we did so with a set of commitments about improving online safety. We started with children. So we said we were going to establish a Children's E-Safety Commissioner, and we said that we wanted to have legislative power for this office to deal with the cyberbullying of children. Because going back 10, 12, 15 years ago, parents were worried about this. Cyberbullying was becoming a problem. We did act, we legislated, we established the Children's E-Safety Commission in 2015, and we continued to expand its responsibilities. But I'll be clear, the big tech companies were not enthusiastic. At every point they said to us, oh, this isn't necessary. Oh, your country could become a technological backwater. You really shouldn't be doing this. But we went ahead, and the Children's E-Safety Commission, now the E-Safety Commissioner, has been world leading. Many other countries have been very interested in what Australia is doing, and already other countries have adopted models that are quite similar. But as we saw with the News Media Bargaining Code, which was another area where we took on big tech, again, they were very unhappy. And you might remember that in January 2021, it was January or February, Facebook took down a whole series of Facebook pages because they were essentially trying to persuade the Australian government not to progress with the legislation that we'd committed to.
So almost not blackmail, that might be a strong word, but it seems somewhat in that realm.
It was pretty hard-nosed stuff, and as a consequence, amongst other things, the Facebook pages of ambulance services, of rape crisis centres, of health departments in the middle of COVID all got taken down. It did not do Facebook's reputation any good at all. And we stood up to it. And Scott Morrison was front and centre in leading on that, as was Josh Frydenberg. I worked very closely with them. Josh and I had the carriage of those issues. And I'm pleased with the outcome that we got. Amongst other things, it's produced tens of millions, indeed it's estimated to be well over $100 million of payments from Facebook and Google to Australian news media businesses, including Nine Entertainment, Seven West Media, but a range of smaller businesses as well.
And that's for their content.
Yes, that's right. And that money has gone to more journalism. We know journalism has been under huge pressure because of the competition that Australian news media businesses have faced from the digital platforms. Now, competition's a fine thing, but it needs to be fair competition. And when Google and Facebook are taking content paid for by an Australian news media business and using that to attract eyeballs to their sites very successfully,
pay for it.
They ought to be paying for it. That's
Absolutely.
That's the principle we stood up for and we legislated, but a lot of pushback.
I want to ask you this before we have to go and we're running out of time. Are you confident that the work that the former government did in this space, led by you and, as you said, Frydenberg and Morrison, will be carried on by Labor? I haven't heard much talk about this. In fact, anything really.
Well, look, Labor have stayed very silent on this. They did support our legislation when it went through in 2021.
And I spoke to Anthony Albanese.
Yes.
I rang him at the time we had spoken and I rang him and asked him to support and he said he would. So credit there.
But during the election campaign, we committed additional measures, $23 million for an e-safety schools package, so that schools around the country, there are 10,000 schools around the country, so that they would all know if your students have a problem, here's the place to go.
Yeah.
We also committed $16 million to support e-safety to deal with technology-facilitated abuse. Sadly, when a woman leaves a violent relationship, very often there is technology-facilitated abuse, such as text messages or other things where the intimidation and harassment continues. So we wanted to resource e-safety to deal with that. We have heard very little from Labor as to whether they will support that. I call on them to support that. This is so important, it should be above politics.
Absolutely. Thank you again for the work that you did. It was incredible. Paul Fletcher, thank you so much for your time.